Welcome to the Bagel Logic Podcast, the show where Papa Thom spreads wisdom like a smear of cream cheese on an everything bagel. Here's your host, Thom Jennings.
All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the Bagel Logic Podcast. I'm your host, Thom Jennings, and we have a very special guest today, someone from my past. We were doing a little bit of catching up before we started recording here, but I'll give you an introduction. I actually went to school with his younger brother, Richard, who I think he works for like something in banking now, right? The National Reserve.
Federal Reserve.
Yeah. So Richard was a great guy. You went to school with my sister Kathleen, who does another podcast with me. My sister Kathleen Jennings in Brighton, New York, near Rochester. So the whole bagel thing, I mean, that ties right in because we grew up eating some really good bagels back in the 12 Corners days.
It's come full circle, just like the bagel, you know?
Absolutely.
Nothing like starting out. No, absolutely.
So I reached out to Marvin, and you're a PhD, which you weren't when we were growing up, but obviously you are now, and you could talk a little bit about that later. You sent me a copy of your book, Modern Day Superhero. And lots of twists and turns in this, so we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this. And it says it's based on a true story. That's the part. I'll tell you, the funny thing is when I first started reading it, I thought it was more of a story about you and stuff that had happened to you. But then I was reading parts going, oh, that didn't happen to him. I mean, I would have remembered if somebody from across the street on Hampshire Drive went to jail. So,
there's things you don't know about me. You know, you didn't come to the jailhouse to see me. So,
right.
But Tom, it is somewhat a true story. A lot of those things are true, even the time travel. So, but we can get into that. You know,
it's well, I mean, you have a PhD, and I was doing a little bit of background research. Adjunct professor at Rochester Institute of Technology. You work with employment organizations to help motivate employees. I mean, tell me a little bit more, kind of unpack the Marvin that I haven't known since high school days.
Well, you might remember me in high school as kind of a delinquent that lived down the street that was getting in all kinds of trouble and, you know, drinking at 12 and 13 years old. So I wasn't the kid that was the most behaved, put it that way, Tom, back in our heyday. But and you probably would never have thought I would have a PhD at this point. Know me from back then, but yeah, I work for a company. I'm actually a managing partner for a company in the Netherlands called 2 Days Mood, and we measure the moods of employees and what is driving those moods in real time. So it's a software that generates analytics on, so you can understand the moods of departments, teams, the entire organization in real time, and understand what topics and what themes are driving those moods, you know, aggregately in real time. So companies can make decisions and have conversations, make changes to change the culture of their organization. So. But that's what I do full time, and I write on the side, just published this book a few months ago, and I really appreciate you having me on this podcast. It's real exciting and great to reconnect with you after all these years. I think we haven't spoken in like 45 years.
It's been a long time for sure. This has actually been the podcast itself has been a great opportunity to reconnect with some people from the Brighton era or and whatnot from our neighborhood that we grew up in, which was a pretty upper class community, not upper class. I mean, I feel like Pittsford, which was one town over, was the real rich kids, but we certainly did okay back on Hampshire Drive.
Oh yeah, Hampshire Drive was middle to upper class type neighborhood, and lots of cast of characters on our street, as you probably remember. Different, other fellow students on our street, older students, and but I enjoyed living on Hampshire Drive, and
very different era today. You know, it's where I live now in Oakfield, New York. I mean, I do know my neighbors, but I've lived other communities where we never interacted, but I felt like, Hampshire Drive, we used to have block parties. Everybody, kind of went to the same school together. And because we didn't have bus service on our street, a lot of us walked to school together, which was kind of interesting as well. Another way to bring people together.
Yeah, I still keep in touch with a few people on our street, and it was a lot of interesting memories, good memories, and some challenging memories growing up. But I always cut through that street purposely, just so I can go down in memory lane and look at your house and look at my house and all our people that lived on our street's houses back 40, 45 years ago. So probably every other day I cut through that street on purpose just to reminisce.
It's funny because I when I'm out there, my parents have passed away and they're buried in Whitehaven. If we go out to Christmas time to put out a wreath or anything, when I drive down that street, I can still look at the different houses. And I remember pointing to them going, oh, it was this house here. And I delivered newspapers, as did our friend BJ Fregley. I'm sure you remember BJ.
Yeah.
So we got to know a lot of people in the neighborhood. But so quickly, just go back a little bit. You're talking about the analytics, the company that you work for out of the Netherlands. Wow, that's incredible because I don't think people really understand. Maybe they're beginning to a little bit more of the importance of having a good culture in an office setting. It's in terms of productivity, turnover, all those types of things. How do you measure that? Is it in productivity terms? Is it in how they're communicating?
No, it's we have an app. Our technology can gather that data, deliver it through Slack, through Microsoft Teams, through via email or the app. It's like a 15-second process, and we use emojis to ask, how is the employee feeling at this moment? They have 40 different moods to choose from.
Oh, wow.
A couple of follow-up questions around 15 different drivers. And then the last part of the process is a funny cartoon. So it's a real quick, easy process for the employees. So a lot of employees will participate because, okay, this is easy and it's kind of fun. I like the cartoon at the end. But each week you're gathering a little bit of information from each employee, and then that's rolling up, like I said, to a team, a department, depending on what moods they choose. It rolls up and lets the organization know, are these group of employees dissatisfied? Are they satisfied? Are they stressed? Are they excited? Based on the mood they choose, and then we have artificial intelligence that'll break down some of their open-ended answers on why they're in that mood and kind of give some of the themes along with those follow-up questions. So, and it's just simplicity, easeability of it, and the data is powerful, and that data is shared with the employees. So the employees can be a part of it and see how they've been feeling, how their department's been feeling, and how the overall organization's been feeling. So they feel like they're a part of something. And then the organization begins to have conversations, asking for other feedback from them, and that begins to change the culture. I would say several years ago, before the pandemic, I don't think a lot of people in a lot of companies in the U.S. really cared how people felt.
Yeah.
But obviously, a lot has changed, right? Since the pandemic hit, the Great Resignation. Now, all of a sudden, we can't afford to lose employees because we can't find enough to replace them. So now they're becoming more and more valuable than ever. And companies are scrambling around like, oh my God, how am I going to keep them? Once I get them, how am I going to keep them? And our tool is a great way of doing that. We're just pre-pandemic, we were busy steadily. Pandemic hit and we've just exploded and we haven't looked back since. So we're really grateful for that. And we're making an impact.
Yeah, my sister and I, as I mentioned, she's an employment law attorney. We've been doing this other podcast I do called Cover Your Assets. And obviously one of the big things that's come up recently is this whole trend of quiet quitting, and quiet firing and all that stuff. And one of the themes that we constantly come back to in terms of, the potential, because my sister represents the employer side, that avoiding potential litigation, a lot of it just comes down to a lack of communication from the employer and the employee. For instance, right. My son today, he went and gave notice to his boss at his current job, and his boss was surprised. And to me, it's almost like if somebody comes in and gives their notice, you probably should at least have somewhat of an inkling that that's going on. If you at least have your finger on the pulse of the organization. But that to me is, or even if an employee is going to get written up or given a warning or a performance review, they should have a pretty good idea what's in it. Those things should never be a surprise. And it sounds like your tool maybe helps to alleviate some of those serious communication issues, which sometimes it's not a bad employer and bad employee. It's just, again, that lack of communication where they're just not telling you what's going on.
Right. And if you can understand not just the individual, but the majority of the employees in a team and a department, then the things you do could have an aggregate impact, not just on one employee, but several employees. And I'll give you a quick story. I hate going to the doctor. Tom, do you like going to the doctor?
No, I got to go this week. So
I avoided for several years. And, I gained some weight. I felt like I was unhealthy, and I avoided it because I was afraid. I didn't want to see the data, if you will, on my body. So anyways, about 8 months ago, I went to the doctor. I went in and got my blood test, my vital signs. And within a couple hours, he sat down in front of me and said, Marvin, you need to work on your health. Here's your health in real time. And he showed me, where I'm at with all these different KPIs, blood pressure and cholesterol and all kinds of things. He said, Marvin, if you can, and he gave me a plan, if you can stay on this type of diet and have this type of exercise, go on this type of medication and see me, every few weeks as a follow-up, you get healthier. So I did that. I went home and I started taking some action. I started going to see him every couple of weeks and seeing the data. And all of a sudden I started losing weight, becoming healthier. My numbers were improving. And now I don't go every week, but I go, once every few months. And I'm a lot healthier right now. Well, if you think about it, an organization is no different. It's a living ecosystem. So, it has feelings, if you will, emotions, and the vital signs can be taken of an organization, not only the mood, but also the employee net promoter score. How likely are you to recommend this place to work? And you start getting these KPIs and some of these other topics on what you need to do to improve those numbers. Then it's pretty much, if you could get a checkup every week on yourself or an organization, think about how proactive you can be in becoming healthier. And that's really what it comes down to. If you don't have the data, you don't know what's going on. So that's what we're doing, is giving the organization a simple tool to have that data to become healthier.
Yeah, and it also forces the employee to be a little more introspective as well, because sometimes, and I think there's a little bit of, you kind of touch on this in the book as well, which we'll get to, the modern day superhero, just the need of introspection to really kind of look at yourself and what are the circumstances that are impacting you, whether it's something in the past or a fear of the future, like the future, going to the doctor or facing the police officer because you're busted stealing a bike, all those types of things. But that's good. And it also sends a message to the employees that the organization cares, because they're spending the time actually asking what your opinion is. Because don't we all want to be able to share our opinion on some level? I mean, we're both doing it now.
Yeah. Everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants to feel like people care about them. We're all human beings. And I think it's about time organizations treat us as humans, as care and be caring and understand and ask how people are feeling, and then have a conversation, do something that's going to make them feel better. And here are I think things are just shifting in a lot of ways, and I think it comes back to mental health, and it comes back to people trying to improve themselves and trying to take care of and help other people as well, and paying it forward. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do with this book is pay it forward.
So what's your PhD in?
My PhD is in business.
Okay.
And I did it because I wanted to teach. And I became, something I always wanted to do. So I went back, got my master's, got my PhD, found an opening to teach in a department over at RIT, and I started doing it online. And then all of a sudden, I was asked to do it in Dubai, in Croatia, in Dominican Republic. And I'm like, sure. So I actually teach at the international colleges. I'm going to Croatia in about 4 or 5 months. to teach a class there, master's class in project management, actually. So that's why I went back to get my PhD, to teach something I'm passionate about, give back, and help students, not only with the topic at hand that the course is about, but also self-help things. I make that a part of my class as well.
So the mental health component. So to the book, now the book is called Modern Day Superhero, We All Possess the Power. Okay, based on a true story. Now, the Charles, it's pronounced Kahn, I assume, Kann.
Charles Kahn, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Who is Charles Kahn? I mean, who is he based on?
Charles Kahn can represent any one of us. He, as you can see, he's a diverse character on the cover of my book, but he represents just the average Joe, average person, any person that has challenges in life, that has challenges in high school. And Charles Kahn is a made-up character, too, that represents kind of me, but also represents, like I said, all of us. And by the way, the play on the name is, the superhero thing, Clark Kent, Charles Kahn, just little creative spin on the character name, if you will.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I didn't pick up on that. I tell you, it's weird because there's a lot of these themes, the high school stuff that kind of hit home for me. I mean, I went through a lot of this stuff in terms of the bullying. I mean, we mentioned Brighton as a good community to grow up in, but there were some challenges to that. I mean, there was a lot of cliques. There was just a lot of those. In my case, my dad, he tried to kill himself when I was fairly young, and so he didn't work, and so he was on Social Security disability, so we couldn't afford the IZOD shirts, all that stuff, and then that. You remember, it's like if you wore the wrong sneakers, somebody would pick on you. So you had to find your way within whatever social group would accept you. And sometimes that was the good one, and sometimes that was the bad one. I mean, are there elements of your high school experience in here that really you just put in verbatim, or is it just kind of a culmination of a lot of things that people have experienced?
Thom, every single thing in the book that Charles Kahn experiences in high school happened. So I'll just tell you the quick back story of Modern Day Superheroes. So I came from, as you read, Charles came from a very dysfunctional family, alcoholic dad, mentally ill mom, and was severely picked on and bullied in high school and all the other stuff you read about. And I had nobody to talk to. I had Camp Seneca Lake as my outlet that I went a few weeks during the summer where I can get away from that and be myself, but it wasn't all the time. So as an adult, in my mid-20s, I started going to therapy, and I came to the point where I got to do something here, and it transformed my life, Thom. I went for 7-8 years, and it transformed my life to the point where I felt like I had superpowers. I still feel like I have superpowers and I could do anything. Super strength and could read people's mind, and I don't want to give away a lot from the book. And I truly transformed my life moving forward, because back in high school, I had terrible grades, a D- average, and I just was most likely to not succeed. I spent much of my adulthood really trying to prove that, hey, I could do anything now that I have the tools and have therapy supporting me, giving me the momentum and the superpowers to change my life. So I always wondered, Thom, if I could go back in the time, relive the same events, because I did get arrested stealing bikes. I did, get chased by the bullies, all the things you read about. And all of a sudden I meet my therapist as a kid, a troubled teen. What would that do to those things that were happening to me in real time in high school? And then you get to see it unfold. So I actually go back in the time, and that's a true story too, because I did have a near-death experience about 8 or 9 years ago where I had a dream that I went back in the time and I kind of experienced this. So that time travel, I kind of think, feel is true. So I got a chance to rewrite kind of history, if you will, on how it unfolds. And do I become the same person I am now, or am I different? And that's the whole premise, because I think a lot of us would say, "Hey, if I knew what I know now, and I knew it back in high school, what would I have been like?" But for me, it was really all about having that therapy and somebody to talk to, because I never had that. I never had the tools. It was total dysfunction and chaos around me.
Yeah, my experience too, in terms of, I mean, you mentioned things like with your dad not showing up to your sporting event, all those types of things. I went through all that. My father was an alcoholic. My mother had mental health treatment. So there's a lot of parallels in there that I can really relate to. But again, going back to that community that we grew up in, and maybe this is typical, at least back then, but there certainly was a stigma to mental health. And I think when things like that were going on, it really wasn't like, I didn't really have anybody I could talk to about it. It wasn't anybody I could say, "Oh, I came home and I found my dad passed out drunk and he got violent with my sister." You just don't have those conversations. And actually,
Right.
I don't know if the school sent you to Camp Seneca Lake, but they sent me to Camp Corey for 2 weeks this summer for about 3 years. And they paid for it just to get me out of the situation, because I had a guidance counselor. I'm just remembering her now, Miss Cosin. And she was one of the few people that I could talk to about what was going on. And again, very similar experience. Young punk, long hair, smoking cigarettes, smoking weed, all that stuff. And then I got some lady who wants to analyze me. I'm not telling you nothing, lady.
Right.
And for those who will read the book, I don't want to give away too much, but you start out in therapy just that very angry, reluctant, like this isn't anything that's going to help me. I'm just here because it's court ordered, and and eventually, the things kind of twist and turn, and there's some really cool. The way the book ended was really good. That was a huge twist, I got to say. I won't give that away, but that was great.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. And yeah, hey, listen, and as an adult, when I went to therapy was I rebelled as an adult. I had a crush on my therapist as an adult, and I got to be careful not to give away too much, but obviously, right. Charles has a crush on his therapist, and that you get sidetracked because you start trying to impress the therapist. You want to. I'm not really messed up. I'm look at all the great things I'm about, because you're trying to impress them. I spent several sessions doing that. So I think many people are reluctant at first, but once you get going, and I like to say it's getting that momentum, and start using some of the tools and start getting that confidence, and then it just steamrolls from there. And then, like I say, and like what the book is about, ultimately you get this incredible confidence that you can do anything at all. And I truly believe that I have superpowers. I'm telling you, I've gone back into time and changed the past. I can read minds. People, I know I'm so therapeutic that I can actually read people on when I interact with them and know exactly why they're saying what they're saying, and know what I need to deliver to them. So I call that, that I can read minds, so I truly believe I've got superpowers, and I outline those superpowers. I don't know if you saw that at the end of the book. And I think anybody could acquire superpowers in their inner self by, going to therapy and getting that help and that guidance. And my goal is to inspire young people that may not have parents that support therapy. Maybe they do, but go at an early age, and don't wait until you're an adult or till you're far along. Get those tools now, young, and get those superpowers and take it into adulthood. So you don't waste any more time. Not that you're wasting time, but so that's the goal. And I think it comes down to stigma, because I'm not going to therapy. I don't need to talk to somebody. I'm a guy. I know everything. I don't need somebody to tell me what I need to do. Yeah, and it's not about that. Therapists don't tell you what you need to do. They guide you and open your eyes to things, and then you take the action. So
Yeah, that last page of the book, I actually took a picture of it, just have it on my phone as a little kind of handy dandy
awesome.
reference tool, because I thought, and you know what I like about your approach in this book is that obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, but you're championing the importance of therapy and how it changed your life, and really that is the kind of the message that you want to get across. Obviously, you're saying, hey, seek out a good therapist, and you're going to get some help from it. And I mean, I personally, I had very mixed results with therapists. I went to some marriage counselors, actually did a whole episode on how horrific that experience was. But as a child, I did, thinking back as I was reading some of this stuff, I did have a couple of therapists that were important in terms of, because the reality is, and maybe this was your experience, maybe it wasn't, you do hit a lot of crossroads in high school where you can go from that bike stealing, pot smoking kid into heavy drug use, a life of crime, spousal abuser. I mean, just really, you have at any moment you're faced with, choice A and choice B. And if you keep going down the wrong road, if there's nobody in your life that you can at least talk it out and kind of talk you off the ledge, you're in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always somebody, and you saw in the book that, I had my grandmother, I had some figures, in my life that I could talk to and bounce things off of, and not necessarily get true therapy, but get somewhat, of an outlet to have those conversations that kept me out of that severe trouble where I could have gone down that road and as an adult, and I didn't. I think that's the other message too from the book is find those positive figures or people that are, that have a good sense of caring and empathy and truly care about you, and learn from them and, interact with them, open up to them as a pathway to getting eventually to therapy. And I was lucky to have a grandmom and some other people along the way, whether it was a camp or whatever, that I leaned on it somewhat, not to the point where I got in depth like I did in therapy, but at least I had some type of outlet.
So what drove you to therapy, and at what age?
I was 25 years old, and I had just gone to the emergency room thinking I was having a heart attack, and it turned out that it was an anxiety attack. I was unhappily married, and I had these voices in my head constantly, negative voices constantly. And I just got to the point where all right, I've got to do something different here. I took the plunge, and it was almost like losing my virginity, Thom. The first appointment, I mean, I was like, oh my God, how, I pictured this old decrepit woman that was 90 years old that I was going to lay on a couch and talk to and just get pushed and hate every second of it. It was not the case. Obviously I walked in and this raving beauty. I wasn't expecting that. Not that all of us will have the luxury of having that. But it was a much more positive experience once I got through the crush and trying to impress her for several months. But I think it came to the point where, what? I got to take action. I got to do something. And I made that call. And I think all of us get to that point. I wish I got to it earlier. I wish I had the opportunity to do it in high school when I was going through, running away from the bullies and all the stuff that you saw that I experienced in the book. But I didn't. So, but no regrets. It's brought me to where I'm at right now on this wonderful podcast.
Yeah, you said you were 25 years old. The therapist that you went to, I'm assuming this has got to be, well, if I'm 56, you got to be around 60-ish. So this had to be quite a while ago. Is the therapist still alive, and were you able to share this book with her?
You know what? She is, but, well, a couple things. I had a few therapists. I had three main therapists in my life. And one of them that I call my Lois Lane in the book, she did pass away. And she was not the one that I had a crush on, but she was like my Lois Lane that really helped me transform my life, even though the other ones helped. And so she passed away, but she knew I was writing a book, and I shared some things as I was writing it with her before she passed away. So I was able to share that. The other one that I had the crush on, I haven't reached out to her yet. I'd have to find her and share this with her. But yeah, the woman in Rochester, Janet Sunken, may her soul rest in peace. She worked for the Jewish Family Services and was just incredible. When I started seeing her, she was just starting out. And then she eventually became the president or in charge of all the therapists over there. And we always stayed in touch. I would always call her or reach out to her about different milestones in my life. Hey, look at, your prize pupil. Look at what I'm doing now, whatever. Like, I'd always share things. We had a very special relationship. It's very touching. And in fact, I get a little choked up even talking about her, but she was incredible and interesting because she knew a lot of people I knew a lot of people she knew. And so I call her Lois Lane because we had to pretend we didn't know each other kind of in the different circles. And so I say, like, she knew my real identity and internally, spiritually, but also, within the community here as well.
Yeah, it's really a kind of a slippery slope, I guess, in a way, because that therapist-patient relationship is really important, and the confidentiality is important as well. And I mean, right now I work as a special education teacher, so I have for a while. I was at Hillside for a while, and I'm at a similar agency out in Buffalo for the last few years. But a lot of these kids, especially when they were getting mental health services and they have counselors and all this other stuff, one of the biggest hurdles that they have is a lot of people will come and go in their life, and because of HIPAA laws, they're supposedly not supposed to stay in touch with you after you leave the agency and things like that. And I've been very blessed because I've had students that have done really well, and we stay in contact with each other, even though I'm technically not supposed to. But I think your experience almost validates my thought that you can't be a therapist just to be the therapist and not have some kind of relationship outside of the therapy session, because it always goes back to that old expression, and as much as it's been beaten to death, nobody cares what you know until they know that you care. And I think you do a really nice job in the book kind of fleshing out the whole therapist kind of pushing and pushing and pushing and having that adversarial relationship, but then eventually how it kind of evolves into that nurturing relationship. And even going back to your grandmother. I mean, your grandmother played an important role, because I know as a grandparent now, I have a very different role with my granddaughter than I did with her father. But all of those roles can be, you just never know what impression you're going to leave on somebody. But man, you have a responsibility, I think, when you have that kind of relationship with somebody to see it through. And I'm glad to hear that your therapist, you were able to share this with, you said her name was Janet, and that she had such a great impact on you. I mean, that's cool. Any therapist listening should feel wonderful about that story.
It really is, like, I get the chills just, hearing you talk about it and me expressing myself about it. But yeah, I think it was a very special relationship because she really did, ultimately care and loved hearing from me. So when I started, reaching out to her, whether it was via email, whatever, like, she would respond back, "Good for you, great, Mark," like, was very, very supportive. So I knew that was okay, even though it was kind of crossing the line there, but not really. So it's not like, we're violating laws but, going back to the relationships that we all encounter, whether it's somebody that we know, whether that we don't know, that we taught, that we were a student in. I mean, it's all about the relationships in our lives, and relationships are complex, important, impactful. And we can't be so rigid on, okay, has to be this way. It has to be that way. We have to let life evolve and how we interact in those relationships. But I think the older we get, the more we appreciate, oh my God, I can't believe I had that back then. So really it comes back to living in the moment and saying, wow, I've got this incredible relationship, or I got this group of friends, own it now. And I think, as you mentioned, you're getting close to 60, or you are 60. I mean, I think we get to this age where, man, all the stuff we did in the past really you start thinking about, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think about it all the time in varying degrees. I mean, like you said, you have to at some point get to a point in life where you do wish you could go back and change some things, but it always does lead back to that same spot. And this is a theme of movies and everything that, if you change any component of your past, it changes you, like that time you're beat up by the bully, that time that your heart was broken, that time you were in a bad marriage. I often tell people that the only reason that I feel that my current marriage is so successful by every measure, I mean, she's my best friend, I love her to death, is because I know what a horrible marriage is like. And if I hadn't lived in a really dysfunctional, wrong for both of us marriage, I don't know that I would have appreciated the kind of, the mundane elements and the peaceful elements of this particular marriage. Because I always thought my parents had a tumultuous relationship. So I'm thinking, well, isn't that how marriage is? Isn't fighting a part of it? Isn't, the makeup sex part of it? Isn't the dysfunctionality part of it? And then you get to a point where you go, well, no, come to think of it, life doesn't have to be dysfunctional. Sometimes it can just be, you reach that point of contentment. I feel like that's the point we're all trying to reach is a form of contentment and satisfaction where we're at. And thematically, I mean, you
Right.
definitely discussed that in the book as well.
Yeah, and you know what? I know people, very good friends that had perfect families growing up, and they were the jock, and they were popular, and all they had, to me, what looked like the perfect life. But as an adult, it didn't necessarily carry over into who they are as a person, their values and everything. You'd be like, wait a minute, that person came from that family? So you know what I mean? So it doesn't necessarily have to, if you are raised in a very tough family and upbringing, it doesn't mean that that equals who you're going to be. And vice versa either. If you come from an incredible family and you don't have your act together, or, in a lot of ways, doesn't mean you're going to turn out really great and have a wonderful life. So, Thom, and the other thing I'll share with you is that it's not in the book, but that bully that you read about that I chased me for all those years and beat the crap out of me, I had my reunion, my 25-year reunion. Okay. And I knew that bully was going to be there. And I knew I had a friend, knew somebody here locally that, knew him. He was living in another country at the time. And I said, hey, tell Johnny that I look forward to seeing him at the, reunion. Not that I was going to do anything, but I was looking forward to having a conversation with him, showing him that, hey, I got my act together. I'm a different person. And so the reunion comes to fruition, and I'm having a great time. And I see the bully at the corner of my eye. I see him coming up to me, and I'm like, this is going to be interesting. And he comes over, he goes, Marvin, he had tears in his eyes. I am so sorry how I treated you in high school. I was such a bad person back then. He profusely apologized to me. It was so touching. And he did it a couple more times throughout the night, but we talked. We actually still keep in touch a little bit as well right now, and he's a different person. So that's the other message is, hey, just because you were a bully doesn't mean you're going to grow up to be that bully. And sometimes if you were that bully, it's something that you might have for years, and you still have a way of, making up with that person, or, confronting the person that you bullied, and having a positive experience, which I do, like I said, right now.
That's awesome. Yeah, there was one bully that lived on our street. I never resolved things with him, but I did have another one that,
Hey,
we did.
hopefully it wasn't me.
No, it was not you.
I know.
I can give you a hint. It was your next door neighbor. So, but
I know exactly who you're talking
you know
about.
what I'm talking about. Well, it's funny because we're in the same line of work. And actually, when I was working at Hillside, he took over. He started there almost immediately after I left. And a friend of mine was there. Was like, "Oh, there's another guy working here. Looks just like you." And they told me who it was. I was like, "Oh yeah, that's the guy that used to bully me when I was a kid." But it's it is what it is. But I think you bring up a really good point in the sense that everybody's always willing to accept an apology if it's a heartfelt one. And that's.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
it's important because the relationship he's got. Charles has his relationship with his sister as well that was dysfunctional, and I know that that has its kind of ebbs and flows. But I said I don't want to give away too much of the book, but yeah, at some point, I think it's hard too as you get to be our age where you do have those relationships that have been fractured and that you may never be able to repair because, we're not getting any younger. It's, and it's a
Right.
shame. It's a shame on some level. I don't know, maybe it's healthy that there's certain people that aren't in your life, but I don't know if I've ever been in a situation where someone has come up to me and asked me for forgiveness and it was sincere that I would ever turn them away. And I think human nature is kind of that way,
Yeah, I just said, hey, listen, don't worry about it. It's okay. Hey, and I just honestly, I was blown away by the gesture, and that's all I needed to hear. And I was over it before. Anyways, I always had that little thing in the back of my mind. I'm taller than him. I'm bigger than him now. I knew nothing was going to ever happen. I was never going to, get in that type of mindset. But it was a very, very good, meaningful interaction. And then I went to the reunion 5 years later, and he did the same thing again.
Wow.
Came up to me, bully, still. So obviously he's carried around for many years. Might have impacted him, but he seems like a great dad. But yeah, hey, listen. All relationships aren't healthy, and you can't force certain relationships, and nor should you have unhealthy relationships that are toxic in your life. You can make that decision. I just recently had a breakup with a really good friend of mine that I've been friends with since I was 10 years old, because it was just so negative, so toxic. So it really took a lot out of me. And I finally just said, you know what? I'm breaking up with you. And this person was really upset. I didn't say it that way, obviously. But that's it. Some people don't change or change in the wrong direction, but we're not obligated to, have everybody in our life because they are family or because we have a lot of history or whatever. We can always make that decision. I always tell my son, there are rules in life. We go to jail if we break them, certain ones, but there are no rules in life in a lot of ways too. It doesn't always have to be a certain way.
Yeah, and there could be relationship imbalances too, and where one person's always the one that's asking for forgiveness or always making excuses for the other person, and maybe sometimes that's you, sometimes it's not. But and I think there's always guilt associated with breaking up with someone, not even on a romantic level, but someone you've known for a long time. I know during the last political cycle there were lots of people that just. I couldn't be around because, politics to me is not something that's worth destroying a friendship over. But if it is to you, then I got to walk away, and it's and it's tough. But there's always it's fascinating, too, because it really does come down to connectivity, because there are people that like in my case, and I'm sure you've experienced this and all our listeners have as well, you have somebody that you just don't get along with for whatever reason. But yet there may be someone else that they get along with famously, that they just treat so much better because there's just there's compatibility there. We see that in marriages all the time. My ex-wife has been married for, I think going on 20 years. And obviously something has to be working there on some level that didn't work for her and I,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But the bottom line is you're to the point now where you are extremely happy with who you found much more compatible, and so is she, your ex-wife. So it's all worked out, and it's part of our journey.
Absolutely. So we'll talk a little bit more about the book, because we're getting up to about the 44-minute mark. Man, this went by quickly, didn't it?
Time flies, yeah. Man, we just started a second ago.
We'll have to do this again sometime for sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
So what was the impetus for the book? I mean, it sounds like you're a pretty busy guy. I mean, you got a lot going on with your day job. You got your adjunct thing. I mean, when did you just at one point sit down and go, yeah, I think I'm going to write a book?
You know what? I started this journey probably about 15 to 18 years ago, and I started journaling my experiences with my therapist. And I wrote different chapters, and I kind of stopped probably about 7-8 years ago, and they were nothing like what I wrote now. And then, I get my craziest ideas in the shower, Tom. I won't get any more detailed on it, but a few years ago, I thought about, my near-death experience and what happened to me. And I said, wait a minute, if I could go, and I kind of came up with a premise, and how do I take this idea and what I've written and kind of combine it into the idea of the book, of what it is right now, a novel. So I started looking for somebody to partner on, a ghostwriter, if you will, that could write a novel with, collaborate with me. A couple of years ago, I was away with all my buddies, and we were drinking and hanging out. Actually, it was my buddies and their wives, and I'm talking to one of my friends' wives. I'm like, hey, do you know anybody that, I'm looking for a ghostwriter. I want to bring that idea that I shared with you to life. And she's like, well, my daughter has written several novels. And I'm like, I know your daughter very well. And so make a long story short, her daughter shared some of the work that she's done, some of the novels that she's written. I was blown away. She loved what I was doing. She was also therapeutic. So about a little over a year ago, we partnered on this. We would have Zoom meetings. I shared all my journals, and she had an idea of how she wanted to bring it to life. And we would meet, probably once every couple of weeks on Zoom. And we collaborated on it. I would read chapters, give her feedback. We go back and forth. And she did it fairly quickly to what you see now. And then and the rest is history. So I finally got to the point where, like, you know what? I'm ready to finish this book and write it. And that's when I started looking into the universe. And maybe she was, my friend's wife was probably the third person I'd asked, hey, do you know somebody that could be a ghostwriter? It just so happens that her daughter is really talented. And, you saw the work, you read it, you love the book. Yeah. So we're going to do other projects together and let this evolve. But I think, sorry to keep going on and on, but that's kind of how it was. I mean, it was really started many years ago, but when I got to the point where I said, all right, I'm going to write it, the universe brought me to her, and the rest is history.
So this is a book, because I guess now that you mention it, it definitely makes sense, because she's obviously younger. The characters seem very present, and I almost read this. And being a high school teacher, I mean, I teach social studies, not English, but I know a lot of the books that kids are assigned in school and whatnot. So really, it's almost targeted towards teens, right? I mean, this is something that would be good for a school. Yes, so this is like a right.
Yes. Yeah, we wrote it to target to young adults, and she is in her early 20s, so she is younger, and so she brings a certain perspective to this as she wrote it. But that's the goal. And I do have interest from some local organizations. I want to mention them, and some schools that are looking at it and considering it. But ultimately, I'd love to have this available for all young adults to read and make it part of their English class. I truly believe every student should go to therapy or have a class that's therapeutic. maybe this could be the book to help, soften that. So it's not just all, concepts and things like that. It's more about, as you read, a novel. So, but young adults, yeah.
But you don't, I mean, anybody listen, you don't have to be a young adult to read this. I mean, young adult fiction is actually very entertaining for everybody. But it said as I was reading it, I mean, I got that vibe. So, and then that makes sense. I mean, to me, this really would be the nice thing too, is that let's say you get this in the hands of a local organization. I mean, people can meet the author, I think that's always, that makes it a little more realistic as opposed to, kids. I find kids really fall into two categories. And, when it comes to books, strangely enough, even with all, the Kindles and the e-readers and the phones and all that other stuff, man, you hand a kid a good book that resonates with them and it's just tied to their hip. Young people love to read books. They still do.
Yeah, and I think, having the superhero element to it, and kind of the sci-fi element, and then also obviously the baseball or sports piece to it as well. I think that's what really is going to connect with young adults and get them sucked into the story. And plus they can relate to the fights and standing up to the bully and all that other stuff, because they're all going through some of that, right? In some respect. But a lot of the people that wrote reviews on Amazon, and I've got close to 20 of them, are people that are 50, 60, 70 years old that loved it, because they can relate to it too, because, they go back to their past as they're reading it and say, oh my God, like you did. Oh my God, I remember that. I remember this. Because, hey, listen, no matter how popular and great you were, all of us struggled in high school at some, in some elements of the things that we talked about in here that, more than others, some more than others, obviously.
It really is where it's such a defining moment in everybody's lives, because it's where you begin to learn to interact as an adult. I mean, when you're in kindergarten or elementary school, I mean, there's some basic stuff, the sharing and the playing and the creativity and all that stuff. But by the time you get to high school, it's a bit about the ugliness of relationships that you have to maneuver, and kind of the realization that Santa Claus is a myth, and all those other things that there isn't always happy endings, that life can be ugly. But then you also have to evolve beyond that and realize that, well, in that ugliness, it's all part of the beauty of life itself too. Life is complex. It has all these different nuances. And man, high school, as I said, it's just a tough place for some people to maneuver, depending on what else is going on in their life,
Wait, did you say there's no Santa Claus? Because that's news to me. Everything you just said, that is shocking. All right, I'm just being honest with you. You're right. High school is the boiler room, man. It is it's everything. It's sports, it's academics, it's social. It has every element of your life. It's like a microcosm of your life. But if it's going a certain way, it doesn't mean you can't change it. I mean, look what Charles did when he went back, started talking to his therapist, and how he transformed himself in the things that he did. So I say out to the people that might be struggling in high school right now that, hey, listen, maybe look to get some help, to see therapists, somebody that you could talk to and kind of guide you through some of the things that you're going through. Because, you can get some really good tools to help you. And you don't have to necessarily be the person you are if you want to change certain elements of it. I think people get locked in, oh my God, that is me. I'm labeling myself and I can't do anything else. I can't be anything else. And it's not true.
Yeah.
And that's what, but it's hard to know that when you're in high school and you're so vulnerable. You're like, it's everything. Oh my God, how can I change this? So yeah, I think that's the message.
In the moment, it seems like just the most, teaching high school kids, the things that they get upset about, I mean, that's the stuff that I used to get upset about too. And
yeah,
like I look back on it and going, wow, I really got upset. And I do that in a way I don't look at it for when I first went to teach high school because I was a little bit older, I would say, "Oh my God, it's a waste of time. It's silly. That's not. You're just young and you're just thinking about." But now, as I've gotten older, I've realized I've been able to be more empathetic when somebody comes to me and says they're dealing with a relationship issue, and I think, you know what, I know how important this is to you because it was that important to me. But you got to realize that this is something that's temporary, and you're going to have to maneuver through this stuff and accept the emotions that come with it. And again, it goes back to all the themes in the book about the introspection, about the power to change, and it's really about changing your mindset. That's the superpower.
Yeah, that really is. Once you control your mind, your thoughts, you control your life. And I think a lot of times we get the voice of, in my case, it was the voice of my negative mom, always saying something negative, everything, and that was my voice in my head. But once I was able to change that, I was, first of all, alert of, being cognizant of it, what I'm doing, and then to actively start changing it. And then things began to change. So, but changing that narrative in your head, and then always trying to look at the positive, and appreciation and all that other stuff that we learn as we get older. It'd be nice to if we had that as we were younger as well. So,
yeah, absolutely.
But yeah.
Awesome. Well, great message. And man, I really appreciate this. I'm glad thank you for sending me out the book and following up on it. These podcasts, when I'm sure you ran into issues when you're writing your book, that there'd be these spurs of creativity, and then you'd have to get pushed back into it to kind of get things rolling again. So this was really nice to be able to have such a great conversation. And you're a great guest, man. I really enjoyed this. Hopefully you enjoyed it half as much as I did.
I did. Let's definitely get back together and have coffee outside of the podcast. Yeah. We can have coffee on the podcast. Hey, whatever you want to do. But
coffee and a bagel.
The last thing I'll say is I want to try. All right, deal. And then anybody listening that wants to look to get my book, just Google it on Amazon. Google Modern Day Hero book, Amazon, and it should come right up. Modern Day Hero, it should come up right away. So,
and I'll put that in the show notes as well. We'll put some links into it. I know it's up on Amazon and everything. But if there's any teachers out there listening, or anyone that has kids that are younger that are going to school, hey, talk to the school about having this book as part of an assignment. I think that they would really appreciate it, especially with all the controversies going out, all these different books in schools and whatnot. I mean, this is one that at least you wouldn't have to run up against anything that's too crazy. I mean, it's just good, solid stuff, but it's realistic too.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it thoroughly. Thanks for reading my book. Thanks for endorsing it. And I love what you're doing here, and definitely want to stay in touch. I really enjoyed it thoroughly. And are you sure about the Santa Claus thing? He's not really.
So funny. Funny story is that growing up in Brighton, a lot of Jewish friends, and I was having a conversation with a friend once. I don't know, it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and we'll end on this. But he said we were talking about Santa Claus, and he said his daughter was 8 and that she still believed in Santa Claus. I go, 8? What are you talking about? 8? Who believes in Santa Claus at 8? And I look like Santa Claus now, by the way, which I totally embrace that. But anyhow, I remember going to kindergarten, and the first day of kindergarten, some kid coming up to me and basically saying, "Oh, you're Catholic. Well, I just want to let you know Santa Claus is fake, and we have Hanukkah, which is 8 days to your Christmas." And I was like, "Dang, dude, this is like." And then I go home to my dad, and I go, "Dad, like, does everybody doesn't believe in Jesus and there's not a Santa Claus?" And he's just like, that was, I mean, I'll never forget it. Literally the first day of school. I wish I could remember who the kid was, but man, he was, wow. He was, I mean, 5 years old, man, just going for it, just sticking the Santa dagger in. So that was my traumatic moment in my youth.
Well, mine came at 60 years old, so I appreciate that. Thank you. No. Hey, listen, at any time. Hey, listen, I encourage anybody listening. We celebrate both. My wife and I are both Jewish. We raised our son Jewish, but we celebrate Christmas and Hanukkah. So, you know what? Just more celebrating, more happiness. It's nothing wrong with that either.
Nothing wrong with that, man. Absolutely, and that's not uncommon. My sister Karen is married to Jewish husband, and they celebrate Hanukkah and Christmas, so it works out. It's kind of, it's okay, folks. You can have both. You can
have it all, right?
You can have it all, absolutely. Kwanzaa too.
Absolutely.
Just throw in whatever you need. So, all right. Well, thank you so much, Marvin Deitz. Great catching up with you. You said we'll definitely do some coffee and stuff like that. Everybody out there, thanks for listening to the Bagel Logic podcast. Your host, Thom.
Thanks so much.